Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from USA Today for Wednesday, February 25th, 2026. Your reader for this hour is David Frothingham. The first headline on the front page of today's USA Today reads, "Upheaval in Mexico could last days, weeks. Experts, cartel violence eventually turns inward," by Josh Meyer. The public display of violence in Mexico after the killing of drug lord Nemesio Ruben Oseguera Cervantes could continue for days or weeks given his stature within the Jalisco New Generation Cartel and the group's extraordinary military-style capabilities, veteran cartel watchers tell USA Today. The cartel produced a similar nationwide show of force in 2015, even using a rocket-propelled grenade to shoot down a Mexican Army helicopter after the Mexican military tried to capture Oseguera Cervantes, commonly known as El Mencho. In 2019, the rival Sinaloa cartel waged war on the Mexican government when it tried to arrest one of the sons of its leader, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. If past this prologue, what we've seen is that there will be at least a week, maybe more, of these sort of violent reprisals by the cartels, and then things will turn inward. Anthony Placido, former head of intelligence for the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, told USA Today. Already, criminal violence has engulfed parts of Mexico after troops killed Oseguera Cervantes in a shootout February 22nd in the cartel's stronghold in the western coastal state of Jalisco. The cartel's response was immediate, spreading outward from Jalisco and plunging much of Mexico into chaos and violence. Cartel soldiers set cars, buses, and businesses on fire and blockaded roads in violence that spread to 20 states. Mexican authorities said at least 62 people were killed, including 25 National Guard members, and 70 people were arrested. But as bad as things are in Mexico after Oseguera Cervantes' death, the cartel appears to have stopped short of unleashing anything close to the kind of violence it has shown it is capable of in the past. U.S. counter-narcotics officials have said in recent years that the cartel has amassed so much firepower that it resembles more of a small nation-state's army than a transnational crime syndicate. The question now, experts say, is whether the cartel will de-escalate the sporadic violence and regroup or ramp up its attacks on the Mexican government. The public and rival cartels fighting over the lucrative trafficking of cocaine, fentanyl, and methamphetamine into the United States. Experts say the cartel will probably train its sophisticated arsenal of weapons on its rival in an effort to get back to its main business, earning billions of dollars in annual drug revenue as what the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration calls one of the 5 most dangerous criminal organizations in the world. Cartels' demonstrations of force have happened before. Most analysts say the cartel will regroup and focus on maintaining the global dominance over the drug trade it has long shared with rival Sinaloa cartel. Nothing they do is going to bring Mencho back, Placido said, and so the most important thing for them is who's going to take over the cartel, and are the Sinaloa guys going to try to take their territory? I don't have a crystal ball, Placido said, but I would think that instead of these big public manifestations where they're burning vehicles and doing all kinds of stuff to protest against the government, they're going to rapidly become involved in a sort of inter-cartel violence and warfare, and that will be more targeted. End quote. In the short term, the cartel certainly has the capacity to wreak much more lethal violence on the Mexican government and the public, including American tourists who have been told to shelter in place. Some past demonstrations of force have included mass arson campaigns known as narcobloqueos, even more simultaneous roadblocks across multiple states than it is currently, and high-profile assassination attempts. A messy aftermath before getting back to business. In an assessment February 23rd, Mexico-based International Crisis Group analyst David Mora wrote that claiming a top criminal scalp will not spare the government from a messy aftermath. Vonda Felbaugh-Brown, a Brookings Institutions expert on non-state armed groups, including the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, said today's violence echoes the unrest after the Mexican government's attempt to capture Ovidio Guzman Lopez, a son of El Chapo, in its stronghold of Culiacan in 2019. Within hours, heavily armed Sinaloa forces paralyzed the city, directly assaulted the military, and forced the government to release him. The violence now, Felbob Brown told USA Today, is essentially the cartel's way of showing its capabilities, essentially an act of retaliatory, demonstrative violence against the state. They are saying, hey, Mexican government, we are punishing you. We are responding. You killed our leader. This is showing what we can do, Felbob Brown said. It's pretty enormous in geographic scope and scale, but it will die off in a matter of time. That could take just a few days or a few weeks, she said. And once this immediate violence settles, then the question is, what kind of other violence will break out within the factions of the CJNG and between them and their rivals, Felbob Brown said. And that violence will be far more complicated and far more lasting. Minus a successor, infighting and turf wars could erupt. Once the initial explosion of publicly directed violence dies down, what happens next depends on a number of factors. El Mencho left no clear heir, Mora said, and the remaining leaders could dispute control. If the cartel doesn't quickly appoint a successor and close ranks, infighting among rival factions could consume the organization, Cito said. That was the case after the capture of Guzman, leader of the Sinaloa cartel, a decade ago. Since then, Sinaloa has been racked by infighting and internal power struggles between the sons of El Chapo, known as Chapitos, and factions loyal to Ismael El Mayo Zambada, who is now in U.S. custody too. Much of that violence is cartel on cartel, though, and would not paralyze huge swaths of Mexico and its important tourist industry, like today's upheaval, Placido and Felbob Brown said. In the case of the New Generation cartel, taking out El Mencho could slow his own cartel's rapid expansion within Mexico and internationally, but it is also likely to leave it weakened against the Sinaloa cartel on several fronts that could lead to bloody turf battles throughout Mexico and even in the United States, they said. A less likely but still possible scenario, all-out war. A less likely scenario is that the cartel will launch a long-term war against the Mexican government to avenge the death of its longtime leader. Over the past half-century, Mexican cartels and criminal gangs have engaged in protracted skirmishes over its sporadic counter-narcotics crackdowns. Colombian cartels did the same thing in the 1990s with car bombs, assassinations, and attacks on the military. If that happens, the cartel is capable of inflicting significant damage, given its arsenal of heavy weapons, many of them obtained from U.S. gun manufacturers, according to USA Today investigation. Most analysts predict that won't be the case because the New Generation cartel, like Sinaloa and other cartels before it, would prefer a détente with the government that allows it to focus on its global business operations. Quote, in many ways, it's just a waste of resources. El Mencho is dead, so there is nothing to bargain for, like there was after the arrest of El Chapo's son, Felbob Brown said. Some public violence is needed, she said, to show how fearless they are, how they can act with more brazenness, more brutality, more violence than anyone to keep Mexican authorities at bay. But in the end, Placido said, it's all about the money. It's always been about the money. The next headline on the front page today reads, after living abroad for a time, she stayed for the health care. And there's a picture of Hillary Hodge, who moved to France with her husband and realized the health care system was more affordable and accessible. In America, you kind of do the math, by Kathleen Wong. Hillary Hodge suffers from severe allergic asthma, but in 2012, she saw hope in biologic medication. There was one catch. She was living in the United States at the time, and biologics would cost her $36,000 per year. A few years later, she moved to Angers, France, with her husband. Across the pond, that same medical treatment was 12 times cheaper. Hodge has had asthma since childhood, but instead of improving, as many asthmatics do, she was part of the 10% whose respiratory condition worsens. By age 32, her inhaler no longer provided relief. Her chronic condition became a big struggle, she told USA Today. Although she qualified for a biologic when living in Chicago, the injectable medication was highly expensive at the time. In 2017, Hodge and her husband decided to make a temporary move to France to be closer to his friends and family. In her new home, Hodge was instantly able to get her biologic for $3,000 per year. That was the that was sort of one of the very first experiences I had with realizing how different the systems were, Hodge said. They had planned to stay only for a few years, but they got pregnant with their son and bought their own house. It's just sort of all of a sudden turned around more permanent. It just sort of all of a sudden turned a lot more permanent. I guess we're here, Hodge said. But honestly, healthcare is a big part of why. Rising costs and access to healthcare are top of mind for many Americans. Nearly half of adults worried they couldn't afford medication or health-related expenses this year, according to a survey in 2025 by the West Health Gallup Center for Healthcare in America. It's the highest level of concern recorded since the survey's inception in 2021. For some, moving abroad can be part of the solution. Other countries, such as Canada, Japan, and those in the European Union, offer lower costs, universal health care, and easier access to citizens and certain visa holders. In a recent America Expats survey by the Harris Poll, 38% of the 6,358 respondents cited cheaper, better health care as a reason for considering expatriation. Michelle Garabito of the luxury relocation service the Lux Nomads said that many of her clients are leaving the United States for health reasons. We're seeing a lot of families with small children also coming through the pipeline, and then we're seeing a lot of retirees who are just ready to go and live a better retired life with universal health care right by the beach and having a beautiful home for half the cost and what they're spending in the U.S. End quote. Avoiding the steep price of health care. It wasn't the quality of health care that was the issue for Hodge, it was the price. Americans spent the most on health care of any country in the world. In 2025, a family health insurance plan averaged $26,993, a 6% increase from 2024. An unexpected medical emergency or costly diagnosis such as cancer can leave people thousands of dollars in debt. It's just not something that would ever happen here for a lot of different reasons, Hodge said. When I just think about what's best for my child and me, just purely from the point of view of healthcare, it's a better place. Along with her asthma, Hodge experiences adrenal crises, a life-threatening medical emergency caused by a severe deficiency of cortisol. She has had 3 crises in the past few years and didn't feel worried about affording treatment at the hospital. In the States, as you know, you kind of do the math, she said. You're like, do I want to pay a $500 deductible to go to the hospital? For a lot of people, that can be a really dangerous question, an equation. Like, how sick do I have to get to go pay that $500 deductible? Here, I just never think about it. End quote. A healthier life abroad. The actual medical care is just one part of why many Americans find their lives abroad healthier. For Leah Mark, who moved to Mallorca, Spain, from Indiana in June, her well-being is influenced in part by the European Union's stricter food standards, including bans on many additives, preservatives, and other chemicals. Even some American food products are banned from being imported into Europe. Mark said she finds the food across Europe not only incredible, but also much more affordable. Mark first started thinking about moving from her home state during a harsh winter and was considering warmer U.S. destinations like Florida, but it still didn't feel like quite the right fit. Everywhere in the United States right now, I'm bumping up against the same issues: the toxic culture, the food, the increasing political unrest, she said. The move became more urgent in January 2025 after a shooting at a grocery store not far from her that killed 2 people. I stopped feeling safe as a single woman in the United States, she said. Mark soon came across the Lux Nomads on social media, which is run by 2 expatriates themselves, Michelle Garabito and Paul Nelson. With their help, she began the process of moving abroad under a digital nomad visa. Now she travels throughout the EU with Mallorca as her home base. I'm so glad I did it, she said. It was really hard, like just emotionally saying goodbye to that stuff. And I do miss some things over here, but I will say the quality of life that was added is so much more valuable and important to me. End quote. What to know about healthcare options abroad. Moving abroad is a major endeavor and life adjustment. It's not as easy as packing up and buying a plane ticket. There is legal paperwork, logistics, and missing friends and family back home. A month-long trial run can be valuable in deciding whether a big move is worth it, especially if you've never lived outside the United States. Quote, I always advise to just do 1 month of living in countries around Europe, specifically because of the regulations, Garavito said. Go eat out every single day and go walk in walkable cities. Just see how you feel. The process of legal residency can also be slow. Foreigners often need a valid visa to access the public health care systems in other countries, and the process can take months. A good starting point for many people is obtaining digital nomad visas or non-lucrative visas, which are for non-working people like retirees, Garavito said. To apply, however, you also have to get private health insurance. Getting your residency card can take a few months, and once you're a legal temporary resident, paying into Social Security, you are enrolled in the country's public health care system. Overall, the timeline from visa approval to accessing health care takes 3 to 6 months. In certain countries, including Portugal, Spain, and Greece, digital nomad visas are a stepping stone to a more permanent relocation, helping people meet the residency requirements. In Spain, people can apply for permanent residency after 5 years of living there, and for citizenship after 10 years. It's a lot of work, but for many Americans it's worth it for their health and happiness, said Mark. I'm not just saying it to say it. I'm so much happier, so much more at peace. You're listening to a reading of today's issue of the USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 16 minutes after the hour. The next headline on today's front page reads, Lawsuits on USPS delivery blocked. Supreme Court rules against Texas landlord, by Maureen Grupp. Dateline is Washington. The Supreme Court on February 24th kept the lid on lawsuits against the U.S. Postal Service for delivery problems, ruling against a Texas landlord who said the federal agency deliberately withheld her mail as a form of racial harassment. The court, in a 5-4 opinion, said the immunity Congress gave the Postal Service from lawsuits seeking monetary damages covers acts alleged to be intentional. The struggling Postal Service warned that without those protections, it could face a flood of lawsuits over its daily handling of 300 million mail pieces. But the attorney for the landlord, Libene Conan, said situations like hers, in which she and tenants did not get their mail delivered for years, even after she filed dozens of complaints, are rare. Conan's attorney doubted that allowing her suit to move forward would prompt a deluge of similar lawsuits, certainly not frivolous ones. Writing for the majority, Justice Clarence Thomas says the court did not decide whether all of the landlord's claims are barred by the ruling, just that the Postal Service can't be sued for intentionally not delivering the mail. The court sent the case back to the lower courts for further proceedings. Still, Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote in dissent that the majority expanded protections for the Postal Service beyond what Congress intended, covering missed mail, even when that non-delivery was driven by malicious reasons. Justice Neil Gorsuch, one of the court's 6 conservatives, joined Sotomayor and 2 other liberal justices in dissent. Landlord alleges lack of mail delivery was based on racism. Conan, who rents rooms in houses she owns in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, contends that postal workers refused to deliver mail to her or tenants for 2 years because they did not like the idea of a black landlord renting to white people. As a result, she said some tenants moved out and others missed bills, medicine deliveries, and other important mail. Conan said she submitted more than 50 complaints to the Postal Service and asked the government watchdog that monitors the Postal Service to intervene before seeking compensation in court. Lower courts were divided. A federal district judge said in 2023 she couldn't sue. That's because federal law protects the Postal Service from claims arising out of the loss, miscarriage, or negligent transmission of letters or postal matter. But after Conan appealed, the New Orleans-based 5th U.S. Circuit said that protection doesn't cover a postal worker's refusal to deliver the mail, which is what Conan wants the chance to prove. When the High Court took up the case, U.S. Postal Service versus Conan, in October, one of the Most of the debate centered on the meaning of the words loss and miscarriage in the postal exception to the Federal Tort Claims Act. In the majority opinion, Thomas wrote that both loss and miscarriage can occur as a result of the Postal Service's intentional failure to deliver the mail. A miscarriage of mail includes failure of the mail to arrive at its intended destination, regardless of the carrier's intent or where the mail goes instead, he wrote. The justices also debated whether lawmakers intended to protect the Postal Service from paying damages for intentional wrongdoing, such as a vindictive postal worker tearing up someone's Social Security check. Postal Service fears a deluge of suits would follow case. Frederick Liu, the Department of Justice attorney representing the Postal Service, argued that Congress wanted to avoid a deluge of suits. The Postal Service delivers more than 300 million pieces of mail per day and receives 300,000 customer complaints per year alleging misconduct, according to the government. If even 1% of those complaints become lawsuits, Liu said, the number of suits filed against the Postal Service would quadruple. Things like intent are easy to allege and hard to disprove, he said of the difficulty of fighting those suits. But Conan's lawyer pointed out that the government similarly warned about crippling lawsuits when the Supreme Court in 2006 considered a case brought by a woman who tripped over mail left on her porch. Even after the court sided with the injured woman, the Postal Service wasn't flooded with lawsuits, Ish Anand said. We know Congress did not want to immunize USPS wholesale, she said. The next headline reads, Vote Denier Now Leading Security of U.S. Elections by Josh Meyer. Dateline is Washington. As President Donald Trump ramps up his interest in taking federal control of the November elections, he's tapped one of the lawyers who worked on his efforts to overturn the 2020 election to be his administration's Director of Election Security and Integrity. That's Kurt Olson, a conservative lawyer who has been hit with ethics complaints and a legal sanction from the Arizona State Supreme Court for spreading what it called unequivocally false claims about Trump's 2020 loss to former President Joe Biden and Kari Lake's 2022 gubernatorial loss in Arizona. Olson, a 63-year-old former Navy SEAL, quietly joined the Trump White House in October as a special government employee. Since then, he's been working with law enforcement and intelligence officials to re-investigate Trump's debunked allegations about 2020, including that he lost Georgia because of a voter fraud and that states used COVID to cheat via mail-in ballots. Those claims were investigated and dismissed by courts and election authorities at the time. Trump lost 61 of 62 cases in court by the time supporters of his stormed the U.S. Capitol to interrupt the electoral count proceedings on January 6, 2021. On a phone call on January 2, 2021, Trump pressured Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, a Republican, to change the official vote count in Georgia to give him its Electoral College results. Raffensperger refused, telling Trump, the data you have is wrong. Members of Trump's own administration, including his then Attorney General Bill Barr, told Trump at the time that his statements about the election were untrue. Now critics such as Mark Warner, Democrat from Virginia, worry that Olson is seeking to advance these past election fraud claims to help Trump gain more control over future elections. The man behind the Georgia raid. Recently, unsealed court documents disclosed that the FBI investigation that led to the January 28th raid of a Georgia elections office was launched based on Olson's own criminal referral to the agency. Historically, the White House officials have taken pains to avoid any appearance of being involved in or directing criminal investigations undertaken by the Department of Justice and the FBI. But in this case, the FBI agent who filed an affidavit to get a judge to approve the search warrant highlighted Olson's role in the case and some of his claims about 2020. Following the November 3, 2020 presidential election, there were many allegations of electoral impropriety relating to the voting process and ballot counting in Fulton County, Georgia, the affidavit by FBI Special Agent Hugh Raymond Evans read. This warrant application, he wrote, is part of an FBI criminal investigation into whether any of the improprieties were intentional acts that violated federal criminal laws. Evans added, The FBI criminal investigation originated from a referral sent by Kurt Olsen, presidentially appointed Director of Election Security and Integrity. Olsen did not return a request for comment left on a cell phone registered in his name. The White House praised him for his work. The president has the most talented and qualified individuals serving as part of his team, including Kurt, White House spokesman Davis Ingle told USA Today February 16th in response to questions about Olsen's role. President Trump remains focused on ensuring the safety and security of American elections. Ingle also referred questions about Olsen's work to the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, which has been cooperating with him on efforts to reinvestigate the 2020 election. The newly unsealed affidavit shows this search originated from, but some election security advocates find fault with what Olsen is doing. Quote, "It is inappropriate to say the least, for the same reason that courts have sanctioned his false claims against past elections," said Pamela Smith, President and CEO of Verified Voting, an organization that promotes the responsible use of technology in election administration. A key Stop the Steal lawyer. Olsen spent much of his career in private legal practice before another lawyer, William Olsen, urged Trump to recruit Olsen for his efforts to overturn his loss in key swing states. According to a December 28, 2020 memo obtained by the New York Times that Olsen wrote to Trump documenting his Christmas Day call with the president, Olsen recommended getting the DOJ involved in his campaign's legal challenges and firing then acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen. Olsen worked with Rosen at a prominent Washington, D.C. law firm. Olsen wrote Trump so he would be taken seriously. Olsen was also working with Texas officials, Olsen said, to sue Pennsylvania to overturn Biden's victory there over the use of mail-in voting during the COVID-19 pandemic. Kurt is a former Navy SEAL who has volunteered and worked tirelessly for weeks developing the papers for the suit brought by Texas, Olsen wrote. Also, this is a person who simply cannot be intimidated. You need a lawyer literally on your side who is principled, schooled in Constitution, brilliant, tough, and committed to both you and the Constitution, Olsen wrote. Then, Kurt can bring in a few other capable and principled lawyers to help you. Olsen did not respond to requests for comment about Olsen that USA Today left with an associate at his law firm on February 16th. On January 6, 2021, as a mob of Trump supporters attacked the U.S. Capitol in an effort to halt the certification of the election, Olsen spoke repeatedly with Trump. The House Select Committee investigating the Capitol attack would later conclude, after subpoenaing Olsen and others involved. Olsen was also deeply involved in the failed effort to use the DOJ to help overturn the election results by claiming extensive voter fraud, the committee said. And in 2022, Olsen represented former TV anchor and Republican nominee Lake in her unsuccessful efforts to challenge her loss in the Arizona gubernatorial election to Katie Hobbs, including claims that the state's electronic voting machines were sabotaged. Olsen was sanctioned by a federal judge for making false, misleading, and unsupported factual assertions in a lawsuit aimed at overturning Lake's 2022 election loss. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit later imposed $122,200 in sanctions against Olsen and another attorney for filing bad faith, baseless allegations regarding voting machine reliability. Watchdog groups, State United Democracy Center, and Lawyers Defending American Democracy filed ethics complaints against Olsen in 2024, arguing that his repeated participation in filing election-related lawsuits grounded in false claims may violate professional ethical standards. What has Olsen been up to as election security czar? Fulton County officials who deny any widespread problems in the 2020 election asked the court to release the FBI agent's affidavit to the public, which disclosed Olsen's role. The FBI, which is part of the DOJ, seized ballots and other records tied to the 2020 election in the January 28th raid. The move marked a major escalation of efforts in Trump's second term to call into doubt the results of the 2020 presidential election that Trump lost to then-former President Biden. Olsen has also been involved in efforts by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and the broader U.S. intelligence community to investigate and bolster long debunked claims that foreign interference played a role in Trump having the 2020 election stolen from him. Trump has specifically tapped Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, who was present during the Fulton County raid, to spearhead the effort. You're listening to a reading of today's issue of the USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 30 minutes past the hour. According to Politico and NBC News reports citing anonymous sources, spy agencies are sharing classified intelligence reporting with Olson to support his 2020 election probe. U.S. intelligence agency officials would not confirm those reports in emails with USA Today on February 16th. The CIA issued a statement saying the president has asked Mr. Olson to look at intelligence related to the 2020 election, and the agency is ensuring that he has the access necessary to do his work. An Office of the Director of National Intelligence spokeswoman in an email to USA Today said everyone granted access to classified information goes through an extensive background review to ensure they are trustworthy and do not pose a threat to national security. Warner, the top Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee, criticized Gabbard and Olson for what he said were their continuing efforts to undermine the results of the 2020 election. Quote, "The newly unsealed affidavit shows this search originated from the frivolous claims of Kurt Olson, an attorney who traffics in debunked falsehoods about the 2020 elections," Warner said in a February 10th statement. Though American elections have always been run by state and local election officials, Trump has recently been saying he wants to put the federal government in charge of the November midterms, which will determine control of Congress to prevent voter fraud. Quote, "The Republicans should say, we want to take over. We should take over the voting in at least 15 places," Trump said during an appearance on the podcast of Dan Bongino, who returned to his show on February 2nd after resigning in January as FBI deputy director in the Trump administration. "The Republicans ought to nationalize the voting. We have states that are so crooked." Some Democrats see that as an effort to use Trump's claims of past voter fraud to justify an execution of the next one that would be biased in his favor. On CBS News' Face the Nation on February 8th, Warner said Trump sees the political winds turning against him, and he's going to try to interfere with the 2026 election. Turning the page, the next headline reads, "Northeast digs out after giant blizzard unleashes havoc." And there's a picture of pedestrians walking on a street as snow falling during a winter storm in New York. Communities across the Northeast were digging out from the snow after a powerful blizzard blanketed much of the region, bringing travel to a near standstill and causing widespread power outages. Several towns in Rhode Island broke records for heavy snow, the Providence Journal, part of the USA Today network, reported February 24th. The storm dumped 37.9 inches of snow on Rhode Island T.F. Green International Airport in Warwick by 7 p.m. February 23rd, a state record, according to preliminary reports from the National Weather Service. It was the most snow recorded there since the blizzard of 1978, which dropped 28.6 inches of snow February 6th and 7th of that year. Islip, New York, recorded 29.1 inches of snow. The Weather Service said that it's a preliminary, unofficial record for the largest snowstorm since 1963. The southeastern part of Massachusetts, along Buzzards Bay, bore the brunt of the storm. Bliss Corner, a census-designated area in Dartmouth, recorded 37 inches of snow by late evening, February 23rd, the highest total in the state, the Weather Service said. Boston Logan International Airport received 16.9 inches by that evening. The Boston Globe had announced that it would not publish a print edition February 24th because of the storm, a decision the newspaper described as unprecedented. It was the first time in more than 153 years the weather had disrupted its print production. Power outages persist. Power outages continued throughout the Northeast. More than 250,000 people were in the dark in Massachusetts alone as of 8 a.m. Eastern Time on February 24th. The state was among those hit hardest by power outages, according to USA Today's outage trackers. Most of the outages were reported in Barnstable and Nantucket counties. Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey lifted a blizzard emergency for Berkshire, Hampton, Hampshire, and Franklin counties, but all others in the state remained under a state of emergency February 24th, according to a news release. Some travel bans lifted. Though bans on non-essential vehicle travel were in place for many hard-hit areas, most have since been lifted. Some New Englanders are still being ordered to hunker down, though. A ban on motorist travel across Rhode Island remained in place early February 24th. In Massachusetts, a travel ban was also in place in Bristol, Plymouth, and Barnstable counties, as well as Martha's Vineyard. Exceptions included emergency or other crucial employees, according to the news release. Restrictions in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Delaware ended. Schools in New York City returned for in-person instruction February 24th, but United Federation of Teachers President Michael Mulgrew said the union would make sure teachers were not disciplined if they couldn't make it in because of dangerous travel conditions. More snow headed to northeast. As the storm headed away from the United States along the Canadian Maritimes, the National Weather Service said a clipper system that will begin with heavy snow in the Great Lakes region will move its way into the Northeast by February 25th. The clipper storm will spread a swath of snow from eastern Minnesota into New England, AccuWeather meteorologist Elizabeth Danko said. Farther south, including Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, and New York City, snow can mix with rain as the storm moves through the region. Another fast-moving storm could hit the region February 26th, Danko said. Next headline reads, Savannah Guthrie offers $1 million reward amid mom's case. Search for 84-year-old stretches into fourth week by Brendan Morrow. Savannah Guthrie is speaking out about the agony of her 84-year-old mother's disappearance and announcing a new $1 million reward as the search stretches into its fourth week. The Today Show host posted an emotional video on Instagram on February 24th as investigators in Arizona continue to search for her mother, Nancy Guthrie, who was reported missing February 1st. Authorities have said they believe Nancy Guthrie was taken from her home outside of Tucson against her will. Quote, "It is day 24 since our mom was taken in the dark of night from her bed, and every hour and minute and second and every long night has been agony since then, of worrying about her, of fearing for her, and aching for her, and most of all, just missing her," Guthrie said in the video, her first public statement about the case in more than a week. She went on to say that we still believe in a miracle, but acknowledge the possibility that her mother may not be alive. "We also know that she may be lost," Guthrie said. "She may already be gone. She may have already gone home to the Lord that she loves and is dancing in heaven with her mom and her dad, and with her beloved brother Pierce, and with our daddy. And if this is what is to be, then we will accept it, but we need to know where she is. We need her to come home." Guthrie announced her family is offering a reward of up to $1 million for any information that leads us to her recovery. The FBI had previously announced its own $100,000 reward for information leading to Guthrie's recovery, quote, "and or the arrest of and conviction of anyone involved in her disappearance," end quote. Separately, the anonymous tip line service 88Crime has offered up a reward of $102,500, most of which came from an anonymous donation. Savannah Guthrie said her family will donate $500,000 to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, noting that we are not alone in our loss. "If you've been waiting and you haven't been sure, let this be your sign to please come forward. Tell what you know and help us bring our beloved mom home so that we can either celebrate a glorious, miraculous homecoming or celebrate the beautiful, brave, and courageous and noble life she has lived," Guthrie concluded. "Please be the light in the dark." Guthrie reward comes after previous videos. Search continues. Guthrie's comments come after another week in which there is still no arrest made or any major breakthroughs in the search for Nancy Guthrie. Law enforcement has continued to work on identifying the masked suspect seen at Nancy Guthrie's front door in doorbell camera footage shared by the FBI earlier this month. The suspect has been described as a male, approximately 5'9", 5'10" inches tall, with an average build, who was wearing a black 25-liter Ozark Trail Hiker Pack backpack. The Pima County Sheriff's Department has also said DNA analysis is underway on biological evidence that was recovered during its investigation, but the department warned that on February 20th that this process can be lengthy. Guthrie and her family have released several video statements on social media in the week since their mother was reported missing. Before the newest video, Guthrie most recently spoke out in a clip on February 15th, speaking directly to the person who apparently abducted her mom. Quote, "It's been 2 weeks since our mom was taken, and I just wanted to come on and say that we still have hope and we still believe," she said in the February 15th clip. "And I wanted to say to whoever has her or whoever knows where she is that it's never too late. You're not lost or alone. And it is never too late to do the right thing, and we are here. We believe in the essential goodness of every human being, and it's never too late." Family spoke out about ransom notes before latest Guthrie video. Guthrie has also posted several other messages directly speaking to the suspect, as well as addressing ransom notes that media outlets reported receiving this month. The FBI has not confirmed that any of the ransom notes came from the person who seemingly abducted Nancy Guthrie. On February 7th, Savannah Guthrie, joined by her brother Cameron and sister Annie, referenced her receipt of a new message from the purported kidnapper, but did not share details. She also offered to pay for her mother's return. "We received your message and we understand," she said February 7th. "We beg you now to return our mother to us so we can celebrate with her. This is the only way we will have peace. This is very valuable to us, and we will pay." 2 days later, Savannah Guthrie told followers in a February 9th video that she believes that her mother is still out there, and she asked fans to report anything suspicious they may see to the authorities. "We need your help," she said. "Law enforcement is working tirelessly around the clock, trying to bring her home, trying to find her. She was taken, and we don't know where." The next headline reads, "Christian leaders urging resistance to Trump policies. They say Lent offers chance to reaffirm faith," by Mark Ramirez. Hundreds of Christian leaders and scholars nationwide are denouncing President Donald Trump's administration and urging more active resistance among the faithful to the injustices and anti-democratic dangers sweeping across the nation, end quote. Quote, "We are facing a cruel and oppressive government," their collective statement begins. "In moments like this, silence is not neutrality. It is an active choice to permit harm," end quote. Titled, "A Call to Christians in a Crisis of Faith and Democracy," the letter says the nation is facing a profound moral, spiritual, and democratic emergency. Its release coincides with the start of the Christian season of Lent, a period of repentance, self-reflection, and resistance to temptation. Quote, "We thought it was important to tie into a season where many Christians go deeper into their faith," said Adam Russell Taylor, president of Sojourners, a Christian social justice organization. "Part of what we're critiquing is the way in which many white evangelical Christians succumb to an unconditional support of the administration, despite the fact that its actions are completely antithetical to the teachings of Jesus," end quote. Leaders of all faiths have increasingly spoken out and participated in protests against the policy of the Trump administration, particularly aimed at what many see as overly aggressive efforts to detain and deport undocumented immigrants. The statement says Christians have a moral obligation to speak out against citizens and immigrants being demonized, disappeared, and even killed, the erosion of hard-won rights and freedoms, and a calculated effort to reverse America's growing racial and ethnic diversity, all of which are pushing us toward authoritarian and imperial rule, end quote. Quote, "This moment is a defining test of Christian discipleship and civic responsibility," said Reverend Jim Wallace, founder and director of the Georgetown Center for Faith and Justice in Washington, D.C. "Democratic freedoms are being taken away and the gospel is being distorted. The vulnerable people Jesus told us to stand with and defend are being targeted and assaulted," end quote. Wallace and Taylor organized a collective effort along with Barbara Williams Skinner, president of Baltimore's Skinner Institute, a faith leadership development organization. About 400 people initially signed the statement, representing a range of Christian denominations, leaders of Black, Asian, and Latino churches, and associations and Christian universities and institutions. Hundreds more have added their names since the letter's February 18th release, organizers say. The Executive Office of the President of the United States did not respond to a request for comment about the statement. The Christian leaders and scholars say, aside from the risk to democracy, they are troubled by a Christian faith corrupted by the heretical ideology of white Christian nationalism, end quote. Quote, people look at it as just a democratic crisis, but it's not, said the Reverend Cynthia Hale, pastor of Ray of Hope Christian Church in Decatur, Georgia, who was among those who signed the letter. It's a crisis of faith, she said. Christian nationalism, the idea that Christian people and biblical law should govern American life, has seeped into the highest levels of American government, with conservative evangelicals becoming a major political force with the strong support of Trump. Evangelical pastor Doug Wilson, who has said women should neither vote nor hold religious or political leadership positions, was recently invited by Secretary of War Pete Hegseth to conduct a service at the Pentagon. Their religious leaders have been so unconditionally supportive that it's almost branded this administration as being religious in the minds of many Americans, which is a distortion, said Bishop Raymond Rivera of the Council of Holistic Christian Churches and Ministries, who also signed the letter. Quote, they've confused proximity to political power with proximity to the power of God. They're not the same, end quote. Taylor called such conflation a form of idolatry and said the Trump administration in turn has misused Christian language to support its activities, such as immigration and customs enforcement recruitment ads that quote scripture in their appeals. One ad, for instance, includes a verse saying, blessed are the peacemakers. You're listening to a reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 46 minutes past the hour. Quote, that feels particularly offensive and egregious in light of the tactics we've seen them employ in Minneapolis, Chicago, Los Angeles, and elsewhere, he said. It's corrupting the Christian faith to advance its own political agenda, end quote. People are afraid. Kristen Kobes-Dumez, a professor of history and gender studies at Calvin University, a Christian institution in Grand Rapids, Michigan, said she initially wondered before signing whether the moment required something more than signing yet another statement. Quote, I realize this statement isn't primarily for people who've been on the front lines of these issues, but for pastors and ordinary Christians who may be just waking up to what's happening and what's at stake, Dumez said. I think it's important to offer a statement that clarifies the political and theological stakes that people can put their name behind. This is a way for ordinary Christians to step up. The letter concludes by tying a set of core theological convictions to actions the signers pledge to take to practice their faith and protect democracy, including defending voting rights, pursuing peace, and standing with unjustly targeted immigrants. Dottie Escobedo Frank, Bishop of the United Methodist Church's California Pacific Conference in Pasadena, said she signed the letter to encourage her Southern California community and all Christians to live out their callings to serve the downtrodden, demonstrate compassion, and challenge political leaders to act on their behalf. However, with church ministries offering food distribution, child care, or elderly assistance having faced disruption from ICE agents or anti-immigrant demonstrators, we're seeing people in our communities who are afraid to live out their faith because of the actions of the government, she said. Taylor understands that many may be fearful of living out their creed. He said one way to overcome such fears, aside from leaning into the resilience of faith itself, is to connect with other Christians. The letter effort includes a website where supporters can find ways to get involved. Authoritarian governments thrive on people feeling isolated and overwhelmed, so we're trying to create a network of solidarity and courage. We have the power to prevent things from getting worse, end quote. The next headline reads, Camp Mystic's family file lawsuit in Texas. And there's a picture of items lying scattered inside a cabin at Camp Mystic on July 5th, 2025, after a deadly flooding in Carr County, Texas. Lieutenant Governor weighs in on licensing. By Thao Nguyen, USA Today. Families of 9 campers and counselors at Camp Mystic who died after destructive flooding swept across central Texas in 2025 are suing health officials, claiming they failed to enforce an evacuation plan required by state law. The lawsuit, filed on February 23rd in U.S. District Court for the Western District of Texas, accuses Texas Department of State Health Services, or DSHS, officials of deliberately failing to follow state law and depriving the victims of their constitutional rights to life and bodily integrity. The families are seeking general and compensatory damages and all other relief that is equitable. The suit was filed against 6 DSHS officials, including Commissioner Jennifer Shuford, Timothy Stevenson, Jeffrey Adam Buch, Annabelle Dillard, Lindsay Udi, and Maricela Torres Zamaripa. The officials were involved in overseeing and inspecting Texas youth camps. The lawsuit alleges that DSHS had licensed Camp Mystic, a Christian girls' camp at the edge of the Guadalupe River, despite the camp not having an evacuation plan as required by the state and camp safety rules. According to the suit, youth camps are mandated to have written emergency plans posted in each cabin. But the suit states that 27 campers and counselors at Camp Mystic died on July 4, 2025, because the camp had no plan to evacuate the riverside cabins where the girls slept. The camp's emergency policy had instructed campers not to evacuate during a flood, which delayed moving girls to safety until it was too late, according to the lawsuit. Quote, "Last July 4th, the floods came and inevitably chaos ensued. Young campers and counselors were killed because the camp had no plan," the lawsuit adds. "The camp is responsible, but so are the state officials who helped create this inexcusable risk to life by directing and executing a policy of noncompliance with Texas law." End quote. Camp Mystic has faced scrutiny for its actions since the catastrophic flooding, including its announcement of plans to reopen for business, even as one victim of the disaster remains missing. On February 23rd, Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick urged the department not to issue a 2026 camping license to Camp Mystic. The department did not immediately respond to USA Today's request for comment on February 23rd. Lawsuit says inspector reported camp had written emergency plan. In the early morning of July 4th, 2025, flooding triggered by unrelenting rain that overwhelmed the Guadalupe River swept away dozens of girls at the historic camp. The camp, founded in 1926, has many occupied structures, including some cabins located less than 250 feet from the river, according to the lawsuit. The area is prone to deadly floods due to its location in a low-lying area known as Flash Flood Alley, the suit states. In total, 27 campers and counselors at Camp Mystic died in the flood. The camp's owner and director, Richard Dick Eastland, also died in the flood, reportedly while trying to save campers. According to the lawsuit, DSHS has been responsible for oversight of Texas camps for more than 20 years. The department's youth camp program licenses, inspects, provides outreach and education, and enforces rules, statutes related to youth camps, the lawsuit states. The suit alleges that while DSHS officials evaluated camps annually, the department's inspectors systematically ignored required safety rules and failed to verify whether camps actually had plans to evacuate campers in case of a disaster as required by state law. The lawsuit further alleges that the department licensed Camp Mystic despite the camp not having an evacuation plan. The suit also states that DSHS Inspector Torres Zamaripa had reported the camp had a written disaster plan about a year before the flooding. She visited the camp for its annual inspection 2 days before the flood and issued a report 2 days after the incident, stating again that the camp had required emergency plans and cited no violation, according to the lawsuit. Quote, DSHS officials quietly decided not to enforce this requirement. For at least a decade, they licensed a camp on the banks of a river in the heart of Flash Flood Alley with no evacuation plan, the lawsuit states. In fact, officials knew the camp had an anti-evacuation plan, a stay-put policy. Camp Mystic faces scrutiny over plans to reopen. Last September, Camp Mystic announced plans to reopen at a nearby location with enhanced safety measures, including flood warning river monitors, cabin speakers, and higher capacity generators that would help maintain communication with emergency personnel. Quote, "We are preparing for next summer at Camp Mystic, Cypress Lake, and we know that safety is of the utmost concern to all of you, as it is for us," the statement read. The camp said it was planning to reopen in late May 2026 and operate it until early August for 6 terms, each lasting 10 days. The location expected to host campers is about 500 yards from the site that was destroyed by flooding. The camp's announcement drew widespread criticism, including the parents of one of the victims, Cecilia Seal Stewart, the only child who remains missing after the flood and was presumed dead. The parents of the 8-year-old girl, Cece and Will Stewart, are suing the camp, members of the Eastland family who have run it for decades, and other owners. Seal was taken from us 7 months ago, and while we recognize this lawsuit will not bring her back, we feel compelled to ensure the truth of Camp Mystic's failures are exposed, Cece and Will Stewart said in a statement earlier this month through their attorneys at the Austin-based Nix Patterson law firm. The Stewart's lawsuit was the latest filed over the deaths of campers. In November 2025, a group of other families of campers who died also sued for negligence. Texas Lieutenant Governor says camp should not receive license for 2026 season. In a letter to DSHS on February 23rd, Patrick requested that state officials delay renewing Camp Mystic's license for the summer 2026 camp season. The letter was shared on social media hours after the 9 families filed the lawsuit against department officials. It has come to my attention that Camp Mystic is soliciting and accepting applications for the summer 2026 camp season, Patrick wrote in the letter. 28 lives were taken, and until these deaths are investigated and any necessary corrective actions are taken to ensure this never happens again, a camp license should not be issued to Camp Mystic, end quote. The Lieutenant Governor noted that the Texas Senate and House are scheduled to hold a joint investigative hearing on the deadly flooding in the spring. According to Patrick, the state Senate established an investigative committee on the floods that will gather the facts surrounding this extreme loss of life at Camp Mystic. I expect after those facts are determined, there may be necessary corrective actions for Camp Mystic to take to make sure future campers and counselors are safe and do not lose their lives, Patrick added. It would be naive to allow Camp Mystic to return to normal operations before all of the facts are known. Camp Mystic should have decided on their own to suspend operations this coming summer, but it appears they are planning for camp in 2026 and will likely be seeking your approval to operate with a renewed license. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from USA Today for Wednesday, February 25th, 2026, on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We'll return for more readings after this short break. Your reader for this hour has been David Frothingham.
You're listening to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. As of this year, our agency has broadcast more than 300,000 hours of radio readings. Volunteer radio readers read newspapers, magazines, and books to area people who are blind or have a print disability, who are provided reading radios. Radio Reading's broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. Radio Reading broadcasts from studios at 1199 Harlem Road in suburban Buffalo. Please let others know about Radio Reading. It's your service. For more information on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, call 716-821-5555.
we'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's issue of the USA Today. Your reader for this hour is Mary Gilmore. We're going to do sports. The $250 million reaction. Tucker can't be bothered. Kyle Tucker slipped into the Los Angeles Dodgers clubhouse early in the morning, February 23rd, quietly dressed in front of his locker and was virtually unnoticed. This is the highest paid player in baseball this season. This was the most sought-after free agent all winter, and this is the player who will be blamed for Major League Baseball's lockout on December 1st. Tucker, the Dodgers' new right fielder, hears it, smiles uneasily at the mere mention of the notion, and shakes his head. What did he ever do to deserve this unwanted attention except sign a contract like thousands of free agents before him? The difference, of course, is that he not only signed a 4-year, $240 million contract that pays him $60 million a year, the greatest present-day annual salary in baseball history, but it's with the mighty Dodgers. The rich get richer, the powerful get more powerful, excuse me, and the angry fans get angrier. Welcome to life as a Dodger. It doesn't bother me. It really doesn't, Tucker tells USA Today Sports. I'm sure it would have probably happened in some aspect regardless of where I would have went, but I think with this team, winning the last 2 years made it bigger. You think? The moment Tucker signed his stunning deal, Armageddon sirens screamed through Major League Baseball. Owners immediately decried that his signing is Exhibit A, 1A, why a salary cap is needed. And the union argued that this is why a salary cap would completely ruin the fair market. Tucker is a 4-time All-Star, 2-time Silver Slugger, and World Series champion, but he has only one top 10 MVP finish, 5th in 2023 in his career. The Dodgers, who just won 2 World Series without him, are paying $119.9 million alone this season for Tucker's services when you consider the 110% penalty for signing him while being over the highest luxury tax threshold. That expenditure just so happens to be equal or greater than the entire payroll for 9 of the 30 Major League Baseball teams. Really. If Tucker had signed the 10-year, $350 million contract that the Toronto Blue Jays offered, no one would have blinked. If he had accepted the New York Mets' 4-year, $220 million deal, there would have been angst among owners, but not a seismic uproar. The Dodgers were the only team that could trigger a reaction so furious that the signing could threaten to shut down the game once the collective bargaining agreement expires in December. I just happened to be on the team this front office assembled, Tucker says. I mean, obviously, every team would want to get the best players on their own team, but it doesn't always work out like that. But this team does a pretty good job trying to put the best product out on the field for the fans. They've done that the last couple years, putting themselves in a position to win a World Series and succeeding. For Tucker, it's a colossal win-win. He not only joins the best team in the land, becoming the highest paid player in the game, but he can also squeeze in quietly and ever so comfortably in a sea of all-stars, MVPs, and future Hall of Famers. The Dodgers clubhouse attendants and bat boys may get more airtime and exposure than Tucker this season, which perfectly fits his personality. They make it pretty easy to come into the clubhouse and just be yourself and enjoy baseball, Tucker said. This organization is first class. We do have some really great players and some great people on this team, so I felt comfortable ever since I got here. I'm just going to do my thing regardless of where I'm at. It's the ideal scenario for Tucker and his low-key personality, where he could go hitless for a week as the Dodgers starting right fielder and perhaps no one would even notice. When you come to a new team like this, you don't have to be the main guy, said Dodgers outfielder Teoscar Hernandez, who moved from right field to left field to accommodate Tucker. So it will be great for him because he won't have that extra pressure on him. He can just be himself. The Dodgers couldn't care less if he makes the media's job easier with quotes and sound bites as long as his bat does the talking for him. He averaged 30 homers and 104 RBIs for 3 consecutive seasons before enduring calf, shin, and hand injuries the last 2 years with the Houston Astros and Chicago Cubs. But he still has a career .865 OPS, 40 points above the league average. I love guys who just come to work and value playing and love playing and competing, Dodgers manager Dave Roberts says. He just wants to win. He's not a self-promoter. He's not going to give you guys a lot of great sound bites. He plays to win. I love guys like that. While 4-time MVP Shohei Ohtani left the camp the night of February 22nd for the World Baseball Classic, with about a dozen reporters departing too, and leaving perhaps the fewest reporters in the Dodgers camp since 2003, Tucker went about his business as usual. No one bothered him. Perhaps no one really noticed him. And in about a week, there won't be a single reporter stopping their Dodgers coverage with his absence. Tucker's wife, Samantha, is expecting their first child in a week. Samantha's pregnancy is the reason Tucker declined Team USA's offer to play in the World Baseball Classic beginning March 6th. He hopes to play in the international tournament one day, but this is not the time to be away from the birth of his son. I'm going to miss out on the WBC experience, Tucker said, but for a good reason. Believe me, I wanted to do it. So hopefully, if something pops again next time, I'll do it for sure. For now, he has a World Series championship to win. It'll be cool watching those guys get their World Series rings this year, Tucker said of the scheduled March 27th ceremony. These guys deserve it. They worked their asses off to be in the positions they are. So it's going to be fun to watch and hopefully be part of the ring ceremony next year. Well, whenever that likely lockout ends and the 2027 season begins. Combine opportunities. These 10 players could stun in testing at NFL Draft Showcase. Can this week's NFL Scouting Combine spark a bit of excitement for a draft class that's seemingly short on fanfare? The annual summit in Indianapolis can serve as a bullhorn for hype in a draft season, which is already well underway. This year's class, however, might not match the sizzle level of some recent groups. Indiana's Fernando Mendoza may be the only quarterback selected in the first round, and he's already made it clear he won't throw at the event. Yet even if several other top prospects follow his lead and opt against testing and working out, the 4 days of workouts inevitably create a stir around a handful of prospects. The 40-yard dash times and the other marks might only go so far in altering a prospect's annual draft stock, but stellar showings can make at least temporary stars out of top athletes. For an example of this dynamic, look no further than Nick Emmanwori, the South Carolina safety who was the marvel of last year's combine before becoming a key asset to the Super Bowl winning Seattle Seahawks as a rookie. With workouts beginning February 26th, here are 10 NFL draft prospects who could be poised to be the biggest combine standouts. Demetrius Crownover, OT, Texas A&M. The nature of this event isn't particularly conducive to creating star turns for offensive linemen who test last on March 1st and are reduced to somewhat of an afterthought. Still, there are usually a few big men who manage to turn heads with their athleticism. Crownover is a good deal less polished than the top offensive tackle prospects in this class, but at 6 foot 7 inches, 336 pounds, the blocker is the kind of project that general managers and coaches gladly sign up for. Beyond his imposing frame and wingspan, the former tight end can move nimbly enough to be an upper echelon pass protector if he can put everything together. Whether he can get there is still very much unknown, however, as he's often undone by the leverage issues that many taller linemen face. But the combine should serve as a reminder of what's available to be unlocked. Bryce Lance, wide receiver, North Dakota State. At a point where emerging talent is repeatedly filtering upward toward the higher ranks of college football, it might seem strange to peg a football championship subdivision product to outshine his Power 4 conference counterparts. Lance's school affiliation, however, hardly tells the full story of his talent. The 6'3", 209-pound target, whose older brother Trey was the number 3 overall pick in 2021, stayed loyal to North Dakota State despite hauling in 1,053 yards and 17 touchdowns in 2024. Even while adjusting for quality of competition, it seems safe to say that a player who last year averaged 21.2 yards per catch should fare well when highlighting his explosiveness, though he might notch better results in the vertical leap and the broad jump than he does in the 40. Jake Golday, linebacker, Cincinnati. Strictly in terms of straight line athleticism, Golday doesn't have many peers among the other defensive prospects in this class. The 6'4", 240-pound former edge rusher from Central Arkansas figures not only to be one of the bigger off-ball linebackers, but also one of the most explosive, with top marks likely to come in the 40, broad jump and vertical jump. Rapidly redirecting isn't his strong suit, so there's likely little reason for him to take part in the agility testing. But while Golday is still learning how best to fully unleash his wide range of abilities, his diverse skill set and impressive growth trajectory suggest there aren't many responsibilities at his position that he can't handle. Eli Stowers, tight end, Vanderbilt. A converted quarterback might not seem like a natural candidate for this list, but then again, there aren't many former signal callers who were high school high jump champions in Texas. Stowers should stand out in both the vertical leap and broad jump, and consider the 6'4", 250-pound target one of more likely players at his position to post a head-turning 40. With plenty of uncertainty about how teams might stack this year's tight ends, Stower has the opportunity to entrench himself as one of the more intriguing day 2 assets for a passing attack. Taylon Green, quarterback, Arkansas. As is the case for most quarterback prospects, Green's combine performance will hardly be a meaningful reflection of his capabilities as a passer. Yet put aside the qualms with questionable decision-making and lapses in mechanics for a minute, and just enjoy the show that this 6'6", 230-pounder is likely to put on. The Boise State transfer routinely outraces defenses with his long strides, and a fast 40 time at his size will surely have some teams pondering the possibility of deploying him on design runs. Green is also adept at ripping throws into tight windows and taking deep shots, with his arm strength sure to be a talking point as he works alongside less gifted signal callers. There are still plenty of inconsistencies to iron out in a quarterback who is too often late or off point. Still, he might be this year's most intriguing day 3 developmental passer. You're listening to a reading of today's issue of the USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 15 minutes after the hour. Jeff Caldwell, Cincinnati. Any number of standouts from a deep and talented receiver class could end up commanding the spotlight in Indianapolis. Caldwell, however, has a chance to rise above the rest in compiling a testing profile that could be elite nearly across the board. The 6'5", 208-pound transfer from Division II Linfield didn't burn up the competition in his lone season with the Bearcats, posting just 32 catches for 478 yards and 6 touchdowns. He should leave Indianapolis, however, with people focused on different numbers. Caldwell is reported to have recorded an 11-foot 9-inch broad jump, which would tie for the third best mark at the Combine since at least 2013. He could also be near the top of the wideouts in both the vertical leap and 40-yard dash, which would help drive home the rare explosiveness he possesses for a big-bodied target. Michael Trigg, tight end, Baylor, at 6'3". If he was only 3 foot, I don't think he'd be in this article. At 6'3" and 250 pounds, the former basketball player operates like a wide receiver, but has the arm length of an offensive tackle. The two-time transfer from Southern Cal and Ole Miss should be able to showcase the legitimate pull-away speed in the 40, and his massive hands and impressive leaping ability should underscore his value as a red zone weapon. Position drills should also work in his favor, given Trigg's knack for hauling in different catches and changing direction with ease. Though his blocking leaves much to be desired and he still has to get stronger, the vulnerabilities in his game won't be readily evident in this forum. Instead, Trigg should create a significant buzz with his rare fluidity and enticing traits. Brennan Thompson, wide receiver, Mississippi State. Fairly or unfairly, his week at the Combine will likely be reduced to his 40-yard dash. That's what happens when a player establishes himself as the SEC's premier speedster, as Thompson has. As a senior, he led the conference in receiving yards with a school record 1,054. The former Texas 200-meter champion reaches a top speed that few others can match, a point to which several defensive backs could attest after Thompson ranked third in the Football Bowl subdivision with 5 receptions of 50-plus yards. At 5'9" and 170 pounds, the diminutive wideout has to reinforce how special his speed is to keep the focus on his game-breaking abilities rather than questions of how to integrate him into an offense. But separating from the pack has never been a problem for Thompson. Kayan Sadiq, tight end, Oregon. This one comes with a fairly significant caveat. Sadiq doesn't have much incentive to go through testing or a workout. Projected as a mid to late first rounder, the 6'3", 245-pound mismatch creator is without challenge for the role as the top tight end. There's disproportionate downside to measuring up against others in this setting, so abstaining in recording any marks until his senior day may be a shrewd move. If he does take the field in Indianapolis, though, watch out. Oregon coach Dan Lanning said last summer Sadiq had topped 41 inches in the vertical leap and reached a maximum speed of 23 miles per hour. While Sadiq is not on the level of either Colston Loveland or Tyler Warren as a tight end prospect, he could exit the weekend as an even more enticing consideration. Sonny Styles, linebacker, Ohio State. If he opts to test, Styles this year put together the off-ball linebacker equivalent of Emmenwuri's outing. The 6'4", 243-pound former safety was long considered one of college football's premier athletes, but last season he carved out a space as one of the sport's savviest defenders, consistently putting himself in perfect position to make plays against both the run and the pass. Improvements to his instincts and diagnostic skills meant he didn't regularly need to harness his rare long speed, but NFL teams will surely be captivated by it. Beyond a 40 time that could come in under 4.5 seconds, there's no drill he shouldn't be among the combine's overall top performers in. There simply aren't many players built like him. Indianapolis is the platform to reassert his singular status. Rice Owls cooking with an unlikely winning streak. Winning streaks can be a fickle thing in sports. Be a little slow or a little late one time, and that's it. A few teams have managed to avoid such pitfalls this season and have strung together consecutive victories. Of course, there's UConn with a 29-0 record. North Dakota State has 23 wins in a row. UCLA has 21, and the Rice Owls have 19 after a gritty 60-58 win February 21st on the road over the East Carolina Pirates. Sitting in first place in the American Conference, Rice is a team no Power 4 squad will want to face in the first round of the NCAA tournament. That's largely because the Owls are defensively elite. No team stifles opponents at the perimeter like Rice, which ranks first nationally in opponent three-point rate, 18.3%, and percentage of points allowed from behind the arc, 16.6%. Rice's opponents have made a total of 88 three-pointers this season on 330 attempts, both of which are the lowest in the nation. The Owls also rank in the top 20 in the country in opponent three-point shooting percentage, 26.7%, opponent effective field goal percentage, 40.4%, and points allowed per scoring attempt, 0.88. I feel like we made a huge jump in defense from last year to this year. We focused a lot on it, Rice coach Lindsay Edmonds told USA Today Sports. I don't think we think about we're trying to take threes away. We're just trying to take away option A. Whatever it takes to win, they're going to do it. Edmonds and her staff are responsible for fostering the defensive intensity. She is in her 5th season with the Owls and has them eyeing their second March Madness appearance during her tenure. Before landing her first gig as a head coach, the North Carolina native and Appalachian State graduate worked under Wes Moore at NC State and played a big role in assembling and coaching the core of players that won 3 consecutive ACC tournament titles between 2020 and 2022. Edmonds also previously coached on Kenny Brooks' staff at James Madison. The anchor of Edmonds' defense is junior forward Haley Adams, who is an exceptional rebounder but does a little bit of everything for the Owls. Adams is the only player in the country this season who averages at least 8 points, 11 rebounds, and 3 assists per game. Her speed makes her a versatile defender, too. I used to be a soccer player, so I used to run a lot, Adams said. So when I came in, that was kind of my bread and butter, just running around. And the best function of me running around is rebounding. I kind of just end up in the right place at the right time. My team trusts me to get the rebounds so they can get out and go score. Adams grabbed a career-best 19 rebounds against the Pirates. She's so important to Rice's success that she played all but 62 seconds on February 21st. She's our Swiss Army knife, Edmonds said. You feel so much security when she's on the floor because you know she can get stops, you know she can get blocks, you know she can get rebounds. She's an intricate part of what we do offensively and defensively. Edmonds said the constant through this streak has been the team leaning on its motto, TNT, which is an acronym for today, not tomorrow. What team is going to show up today, whether that's in the weight room, on the court, at home, or on the road? And they really bought into that, Edmonds said. This team also has a ton of mental toughness and a ton of just togetherness, and not afraid of those adversary moments. We won't back down from those challenges. We step up. Casual Fans Guide to NHL Post-Milan. The 2026 Winter Olympics in Milan Cortina are over, and the United States is returning with 2 gold medal hockey teams. The women's side was able to outlast Canada in an overtime and won on a phenomenal stick rip into backhand goal from Megan Keller, whereas the men also won in overtime courtesy of a snipe from Jack Hughes. The USA was abuzz after the wins, but while hockey is over internationally, NHL fans are now eagerly awaiting the recommencement of the season that is entering its final stretch. There are divisional races like the brutally tight Atlantic and the similarly close Pacific. Dominant teams like the Colorado Avalanche, although their shine wore off a bit going into the break, and teams that are just plain fun like the Wild, where Quinn Hughes was traded from Vancouver earlier this season. There's a little something for everyone, and with most teams having about 25 games left to play this season, there's a lot of on-ramp ahead of the always exciting Stanley Cup playoffs. Not to mention there was some amazing players who didn't compete in the Olympics due to the international ban on Russia, including all-time NHL goals leader Alex Ovechkin, plus Andrei Velasquez and Ilan Sorokin, arguably the best 2 goalies in the sport. Of course, those looking to support some of the key players who won Team USA gold may be disappointed. Connor Hellebuyck's Winnipeg Jets and Jack Hughes' New Jersey Devils are all but out of the playoff race. With that being said, other key players like Quinn Hughes and Dylan Larkin are firmly in the thick of things. Here's what to know about the NHL season as it stands and whose fans can root for depending on their proclivities. The obvious geography. If you're in a city with a team, the easiest move is to root for that team. This probably doesn't need exposition. USA, USA. If you just can't get away from the high of the Team USA win, there are a few players to look out for. Quinn Hughes, who notched the game winner for the United States against Sweden, plays defense for the Minnesota Wild. He was traded from the Vancouver Canucks earlier this season and is tied for 4th among NHL defensemen in points with Avalanche blue liner and Canadian Cale Makar. I'm sorry. I'm terrible with names. I'm going to try harder. In addition, Matt Boldy and Brock Faber play for Minnesota. Then there's center Dylan Larkin, who plays center is the captain for the Detroit Red Wings. The Red Wings are entrenched in the most brutal divisional chase in the league, with the Atlantic Division having 4 teams within 3 points of each other. An original 6 team, the Wings have one of the most storied histories in the NHL and are trying to break a 9-year playoff drought, the longest in team history. Jack Hughes and Connor Hellebuyck play for the New Jersey Devils and the Winnipeg Jets, respectively. Both are effectively out of the playoff picture, so if new fans are willing to wait, these could be teams to follow. Hughes plays with his brother Luke, who is rehabbing a shoulder injury and is expected to return in early March. He is the youngest of the Hughes brothers. Give me an underdog. The underdog to end all underdogs? The Buffalo Sabres are also entrenched in the bloodbath that is the Atlantic and looking to snap a league-high 14-season playoff drought. Led by USA forward Tage Thompson and captain Rasmus Dahlin, a star for Sweden, the Sabres were hockey's hottest team in December, heading into January, winning 10 consecutive games in December and 15 out of 17 after the span. NFL fans will know Buffalo has some of sports' most dedicated fans, and the Sabres reflect that. Plus, they semi-regularly don the Goat's Head jerseys of the 1990s. Huge bonus. Yay, Sabre. No. Sandwiched between Detroit and Toronto are the Ottawa Senators. Canada's capital has a team that is riding the line between playoff team and rebuild, with Brady Tkachuk at the forefront. The Senators have the worst goalie play in hockey by a wide margin, but with a solid defense and a year removed from a playoff berth, not to mention at least a fighting chance at the Atlantic, Ottawa is a fun team to get in on early. Perhaps, however, you'd like to have the look at the West. The Seattle Kraken have made the playoffs just once in their first 4 years in the NHL, but are the Razors' edge to do the same this year. They're currently third in the Pacific, meaning if the season ended today, they'd be in. Matty Beiners and Jordan Eberle are top scorers for the team, while backup goalie Philip Grauber just turned in a nice performance for Germany in Italy. You're listening to a reading of today's issue of the USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 30 minutes past the hour. Moving on to the life section, Prost stands to witness history on Survivor 50. Apparently this is what everybody's been talking about on TV and radio and whatever. As Jeff Prost stood in front of Survivor 50 cast on the Mamakua beaches of Fiji last summer, looking directly at 24 contestants across the show's more than 25-year run, he was mesmerized by what his career has become since he was pitched the series decades ago. The milestone game brought back such players as Jenna Lewis Doherty, who played in the debut season in Borneo in 2000, and newer breakouts such as Savannah Louie, who just won the season before. It wasn't my life passing before my eyes. It was a series of turning points in my life, Prost said, before the historic 3-hour season 50 premiere on February 25th, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, CBS and Paramount, and premium available to stream the next day with any Paramount Plus plan. I never thought of Survivor as a job or a game show. I thought of it as an adventure of the human spirit, and people still, to this day, think I'm a little over the top with it. It's never changed. A year ago, the host and producers still had a short list of 50 former players who could return. Each cut since was excruciating, he said. Ultimately, the team landed on 24 All-Stars who will outwit, outplay, and outlast one another for the $1 million prize and bragging rights that come with winning the show's most competitive season to date. The new season, titled Survivor 50 in the Hands of the Fan, is a love letter to all viewers, whether they turned in just a few seasons ago or have watched every time since Probst first uttered, "The tribe has spoken." Probst spoke with USA Today about the grandiosity that only decades of reality TV storytelling can create. He reveals a plan for the premiere that didn't end up happening, the first player he personally called to the cast, and the contestant he's most crushed didn't make it. This conversation has been edited and condensed for length and clarity. The season 20 premiere, which is still my favorite season, opens up with those helicopters, with the hero tribe on one side and the villains on the other. How will season 50 premiere compare? We actually wanted to do helicopters for 50, but we couldn't find enough in Fiji. We even went to the Fiji military to see if we could pull it off because we wanted to recreate that epic moment, but we were unable to do it. But Survivor 50 has the same gravitas that you're talking about. The question was, would the players show up to make it great? And just like in season 20, they did. This is the first time we're having 3 tribes of 8. I'm assuming we'll see 2 tribes go to the tribal council in an episode. How much can you tell about how this will work with so many players? We did not initially set out to have 24 players. We thought we were going to have 20 because that's a really good number for us in terms of how the episodes work and the math that comes from eliminating players. Honestly, we were struggling to make cuts, and there was no easy cut. It was really a question of this person or that person. Suddenly, we went to 3 tribes of 8. What are we going to do with all of them? How are we going to get rid of them? From a producing standpoint, that is what made it so exhilarating. There were a lot of very fun problems to solve. We have so many interesting combinations on each tribe, like Q and Aubrey on Vaatu. You have Ozzy and Siri reuniting on Sela. How do you decide who goes on which tribe? The best way to explain how we approach all of this was to imagine the biggest whiteboard you've ever seen, with every possible idea on it. What we really wanted is just an array of different types of players, different eras, and success or lack of success in the game, so we can represent as much as possible the entire tapestry of our 25 years. And so in that sense, we just started putting people together. There's no combination you can look at that doesn't have intrigue. So all of the tribe pairings worked, and ultimately at one point we just said, okay, shall we stop here? There was a lot of speculation that someone from season 1 would return. How did y'all land on Jenna Lewis specifically, and are there other names that were in the mix? The first person I called about playing was Jenna Lewis, and I didn't know what she'd say, but everybody agreed. She kind of embodied everything about the first season. A young mom out there who didn't get a loved one video, who played a very kind of new era game 25 years ago. And Jenna said, I couldn't be more honored. Yes. And that was the first moment where I thought, this might work. There are rumors of pre-gaming alliances made before the season was filmed. How does that impact things once they start? There's way too much emphasis put on pre-game alliances and all that. They really are giving that too much weight because there is one winner, period. And if you stand in my way, it doesn't matter. I'm taking you out. You're going to see that this season. What may start out as something that appears to be a friendship from 20 years ago might mean everything in a positive way. It might mean everything in an unexpected way. These are players. This is not a picnic. You're working on season 51 and possibly 52. Is there any chance we'll have another returning player season soon? And maybe some of the people who didn't make the cut from 50 can come back? Oh, 100%. We love returning player seasons. The only reason we waited this many years is that you had to find players you wanted to see come back. After season 40, we thought, now we need to get a new crop of players, and then we'll do a returning player season. I would definitely expect another returning player season before 5 years. And yes, there are players we would love to invite back that we would have had in season 50 if we had the room. Hopefully, when we call in the future, their feelings won't be hurt and they'll say yes. Hopefully, Amanda Kimmel's schedule clears up because I need her back. That was a big disappointment, probably my biggest personal disappointment. When she initially said yes, I was ecstatic. And then we gave her the shoot date and she said, I can't make it happen. And she was disappointed. But what I loved about Amanda is that she just called us and said, look, I'll tell you right now, it's not going to happen. And so that opened up the spot for somebody. The Royals report. William Kate at BAFTA. Prince William and Princess Kate stepped out at the British Academy Film Awards in London on February 22nd for their first joint appearance at the awards ceremony since 2023. Kate smiled and waved as she walked the red carpet, clad in a sheer layered pink and maroon gown, accessorized with diamond earrings and a thick cuff. Her hair was long and in loose waves. William wore a maroon velvet tuxedo jacket with black lapels. Their appearance at the BAFTAs, the British equivalent of the Oscars, came 3 days after William's uncle, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, was arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. The former Prince Andrew has denied wrongdoing in his ties to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Music. Grant returns from injury with The Me That Remains. Amy Grant was in recovery mode after 2 surgeries following her July 2022 bike accident that caused traumatic brain injury. She was cleaning out spaces and closets in her Franklin, Tennessee home when one of her daughters asked, "What is your creative space in this house?" Grant realized, "I've never had a room where I could close the door in this house." So she tells USA Today she went upstairs and cleaned and cleaned and cleaned, and when she finished, instinct kicked in. "I picked up a pen and wrote a poem, The Me That Remains. I was still recovering. I wasn't thinking about writing, and my short-term memory was a struggle at the time. It was so hard to write music because I couldn't remember a lyric I'd written 5 minutes earlier." Grant, 65, resolved her limitation by reaching out to longtime friend Mac McAnally, a Nashville institution, as a musician, songwriter, and producer. In January of 2025, the pair convened in a studio with a couple of outlines from Grant, meeting every few months throughout the year to work on more songs until Mac said, "Hey, we got a record," Grant recalls with a laugh. Grant shares details of her new album. The finished product takes its name from the poem Grant wrote in her room upstairs, the title track, The Me That Remains. The 10-song album, arriving May 8th, is Grant's first collection of all original songs in 13 years. The faith-based How Mercy Looks From Here landed in 2013. In January, Grant released what became the first song on the new album, the breezy folk pop nugget, the 6th of January, Jaeger's Farm, which she told USA Today at the time invited people to sit with unrest. Along with teaming with McAnally, who produced the record, Grant shares her warm voice, now tinted with the huskiness that comes with age and wisdom, on profoundly personal songs with husband Vince Gill, Friend Like You, and daughters Sarah Cannon and Corrina Gill, album closer The Other Side of Goodbye. Grant fans also will thrill at the revelation that career-long musical partner Michael W. Smith also joins the track list on the redemption study, The Saint. "I was going, this feels so good," Grant said of the year-long recording process. "I'm re-engaged in the community that is filled with joy." To celebrate the Me That Remains, Grant will hold an album release show at the Ryman Auditorium in Nashville on May 9th. Tickets go on sale February 27th via amygrant.com. She also is playing a spate of dates in February and May, with the Ryman show wrapping her plans for now. Grant is not trying to turn the clock back. Grant doesn't camouflage the emotional and physical distress she has endured since her accident as she sings on the title track, "Life cut me wide open. When my head hit the ground, wasn't my time for dying. Guess my soul just stuck around." She also is realistic that her nearly 50-year career as a contemporary Christian supernova that deterred an unprecedented mainstream success with her 1991 Heart in Motion album and the pop hits Baby Baby, Every Heartbeat, and That's What Love Is For was a lifetime ago. This is not the music business of the 1990s. There has never been a noisier world, and I harbor no illusions, she says. I'm not trying to turn the clock back, but this is music that feels comfortable to me. Life does present you with all kinds of weird things. You're listening to a reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 45 minutes after the hour. Ice out pins heat up political messaging. Blink and you might miss it. Amid the Prada puffer jackets, Celine sunglasses, and fluffy Susanna Chow coats keeping people warm on the streets of New York, there was a quieter fashion statement heating up. Small white pins with bold black letters that read, "Ice out and be good." The pins, part of a campaign endorsed by a coalition including the American Civil Liberties Union, Mayor Motto, National Domestic Workers Alliance, and Working Families Power, already made their way onto red carpets at the Golden Globes and the Grammys. They found a small but powerful cohort of tastemakers during the invitation-only events of the New York Fashion Week. The Ice Out and Be Good pins, which originated as a response to the fatal shootings of Renee Good, Keith Porter, and Alex Preddy by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Border Patrol agents in December and January, have become part of anti-ICE demonstrations and a larger push against Trump administration's immigration raids. Mexican designer Patricio Campello chose the subtle accessory as the underpinning of his Fall-Winter 2026 collection. Like the statement-making El Golfo de Mexico t-shirt he wore during his closing salute last February, Campillo took a bow after his Valentine's Day show wearing an ice-out pin on the front of his tan crop jacket. Identity becomes something sculpted, rehearsed, discovered, and reaffirmed through the garments we choose, Capillo said in his show notes. In a largely apolitical season, the pin statement making politics casts a spotlight on the missive from a select few designers to make heard the voices of immigrant and first-generation creatives and fashion workers who uphold the inner workings of the industry. Ice Out pins pop up on Justin Bieber, Billie Eilish at New York Fashion Week 2026. Expletive ICE. Dominican musical artist Planta Industrial yelled into the microphone at the start of the Rio Fashion Show on February 15th. Models moved through a mosh pit as Planta Industrial performed, a reminder of the beauty amid the world's chaos. Designer Rio Uribe crafted wearable armor, resilient enough for protest and expressive enough for celebration, according to the show's notes. Some looks were topped with pins attached to trapper hats, subtle symbols of civic presence. Pieces rooted in Mexican culture became more about community than about clothing. To step forward boldly, dressed not only for who they are, but for what they refused to silence, per the notes. Fusing music and fashion during the week of runway shows organized by Council of Fashion Designers America, CFDA, followed the Grammy Awards, coming 10 days before the start of the CFDA calendar. In his highly anticipated return, Justin Bieber and his wife, Hailey Bieber, chose the Grammys red carpet to wear matching black outfits and matching ice-out pins. Billie Eilish and her brother Phineas also rocked the pins, as did Kehlani. Eilish used her Song of the Year acceptance speech to hammer home her point: no one is illegal on stolen land. A week later, while fashion shows were underway, multiple stars at the Film Independent Spirit Awards donned pins, from Natasha Rothwell, Tessa Thompson, and Mark Hamill to the Pit stars Taylor Dearden and Supriya Ganesh. Pro-immigrant messages pop up at Prabal Gurung Private Policy. Home no longer feels certain, designer Prabal Gurung posted in his show notes. The ground shifts, safety feels conditional. In an accelerated and fractured world, I find myself returning to one quiet question. Where is home now? Gurung joined some of his peers in using his collection to interrogate the state of the world and the point to the often unseen immigrant labor behind the glossy multi-billion-dollar fashion industry. The Nepalese-American designer highlighted the creation of the collection: lace from France, wools from Italy, textiles from Japan, embroidery from India, and knits from Nepal, with each piece assembled in New York by immigrant hands who crossed oceans believing in the possibility. Meanwhile, at Private Policy, Asian identity was on display, just in time for the Lunar New Year. Created by China-born Parsons School of Design graduate Hao Wan Lai, Private Policy's collection showcased the experiences of early Asian immigrants alongside those of Asian Americans and new generation immigrants today, tracing how labor evolves while remaining ever present, he wrote in the show's notes. The collection focused in part on the first generation of Chinese laborers who built America's transcontinental railroads in the 19th century, whose contributions have long been excluded from the dominant historical narratives, with functional workwear silhouettes as the starting point to the next era of power suiting and sharply tailored office workwear of the 1980s. The show, which also gave attendees Private Policy branded chopsticks as a symbol of shared culture, chose to zoom in on the broader trajectory of Asian labor, from physical infrastructure to emotional, intellectual, and cultural work. What emerges is not the disappearance of labor, but its transformation and increasing visibility. Project Runway alum Vijay Floresca previewed a collection of gowns and suits where several models wore ice-out pins. I'm an immigrant, Floresca told Washington Square News. I support my fellow immigrants, and I believe that America is a community for everyone. At the Liebland Studios, the final show of the CFDA schedule, the inspiration for the collection summed up the sentiment of New York Fashion Week. Wealth, cool, and luxury against uncertainty. How can fashion keep balancing it? The Caribbean brand from Santo Domingo, founded in 2014 by Angelo Beto and Yamal Abarhai, makes a bold claim with its collection name, Nada es Inocente, or Nothing is Innocent. A declaration against conformity and for individuality, a reminder of what we all understand to be true about modern politics, they wrote in the show notes. The show incorporated pins and pieces with statements including, "It's better in the Caribbean," and leaned into memory and time as drivers for the future. Perhaps one of the most all-encompassing messages of the week came at the very end. It's the result of searching for identity and individuality in a political landscape that punishes it. We're going to finish with horoscopes. Aries, March 21st to April 19th. Certainty and the unknown may play tricks on your mind. Taurus, April 20th to May 20th. Something a friend says may throw you off your game. Self-esteem hiccups are likely. Gemini, May 21st to June 21st. What you say may be misconstrued today. Prepare for a disconnect between what you mean and how it's received publicly. Cancer, June 22nd to July 22nd. Receiving a vague sense of knowing, your intuition is heightened but hard to interpret. Leo, July 23rd to August 22nd. You may want to let others in on your secret, but wondering if you'll be supported once they know. Virgo, August 23rd to September 22nd. People at work may not understand you today. The Gemini moon squaring off with Mercury crosses the professional wires. Libra, September 23rd to August 23rd. You're being challenged to shed an old narrative. Is a belief turning you into a martyr in your everyday routine? Scorpio, October 24th to November 21st. Is analyzing getting in the way of enjoyment? Focus on the feeling. Sagittarius, November 22nd to December 21st. A conversation may strike you to the core today. Is a relationship situation playing over and over in your head? Capricorn, December 22nd to January 19th. Your work life might feel chaotic today. The Gemini moon creates friction with Mercury and little may go as planned. Aquarius, January 20th to February 18th. Getting what your heart wants may rely on you rewriting old self-worth scripts. Got a pen and paper ready? Pisces, February 19th to March 20th. Personal revelations are brewing. Pay attention to how you feel today. Something is bubbling up from your core. You've been listening to a reading of the USA Today for Wednesday, February 25th, 2026. We read the USA Today weekdays at noon. For more information, call us at 821-5555. Your reader for this hour has been Mary Gilmore. Have a wonderful day.
Coming up next on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have episode number 40 of Mark Twain by Ron Chernow. Following that, 3 o'clock is Healthy Living, and at 4 o'clock, a re-airing of today's Buffalo News. Stay with us for these readings and more. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another